National Convention. It is day 2, although I guess last night doesn't qualify necessarily as a full day 1, but we're in the second day of our programming here at the National Convention. And thank you to all of us. Thank you to all of you who are joining us online. We've had great conversations so far in the first couple of days, and I am really excited to be able to bring to people who can't be with us here in Washington a taste of the content of what's going on here. It is vibrant. There is no shortage of what to discuss. Prior to the beginning of the convention, we thought there was more than enough already between the situation in Gaza, the situation in the West Bank, the larger regional dynamics, and then, of course, we come to the convention under the fog of war having just begun. I do want to acknowledge that at the outset of our conversation, because both Lior and Amy, I was just chatting with you guys offline here. The last time something broke out in June, you were at another peace conference in Paris. And it is not easy for many of our guests from Israel and from the region to be here and be away from family. And we are reading our news alerts. You're getting the notifications, I'm sure, on the apps. Your families are most likely scrambling. And so I just want to start by acknowledging that and saying thank you for being here. Please know that all of us are thinking about you and your family. And how are you doing? Let me start. Amy Cohen is the International Director for Ir Amim. We'll talk a little bit about Ir Amim and what it is and the incredible work it does. But Amy, what's with you and your family?
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for this opportunity. And really thank you also for acknowledging the difficulty for us to be here. On one hand, it is something really, really special for us to be here. And I think it was also wonderful what Senator Van Hollen recognized, the great contribution of human rights activists and organizations working in Israel and Palestine. But at the same time, there is a lot of heaviness and it feels very overwhelming. My family lives just outside of West Jerusalem and they're literally running from missiles every 20 minutes. Sirens are going off. And so for me, there is a sense of feeling guilty of leaving the family behind to be here. At the same time, thankfully, they are safe, and may it continue that way. And I think that they are here in spirit. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, and please know we are definitely with you and your family. Lior Amichai, you are the director of Peace Now, Shalom Achshav in Israel. We've known each other for quite some time. You still look like a very young man, but it feels like I've known you for a couple of decades and you're still a very young man, which is good. But you too, I mean, you've left family, and tell us how they're doing, how you're doing.
Thank you for organizing this and for sharing this with us. So I second what Amy says. It is troubling, of course. It's challenging, but at least it's very encouraging to be here and to see all these people who are working hard that will have peace back at home. So it's challenging, it's difficult, but it's also encouraging to be here.
Yeah, and Amy mentioned we had as a speaker at the very end of the first plenary today, Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, who's one of our heroes at J Street, one of the heroes of the Israeli-Palestinian pro-peace, human rights, pro-democracy world. And he did acknowledge the vital importance of organizations like Shalom Achshav, like Ir Amim, that are carrying on in a very, very difficult environment. And so I guess I also would love to get a few words from each of you for folks watching online with us at Word on the Street to tell us a little bit about your organizations and the focus that you each have. I'll start with you, Amy. I mean, I'd love to hear about Ir Amim, and I've known it forever. I lived in Jerusalem when it was first getting going, and really would love to hear more from you about what the work is that you do.
Yeah, sure. So for those that do not understand Hebrew, so Ir Amim means city of nations or city of peoples. And it is essentially, it is representative of what Jerusalem is, not only Ir Amim's vision of it being a binational multi-religious and multicultural city, but it actually is the character of the city it is today and has been for so many years. And Ir Amim essentially works at the intersection of human rights and geopolitics. So we have been around for about 20 years now, and we have been working to advance a political resolution to the conflict, namely based on the establishment of two capitals, of a shared capital in Jerusalem, a two-state framework. However, that is then configured in the future. We have a lot of creative solutions to that, but at the same time addressing all of the human rights abuses in the absence of some sort of political resolution at present.
And Lior, your organization is really the grandparent of them all, really the original Israeli peace organization. I'm sure that most of the people watching do know about Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, but perhaps you could just give us a little picture of the work today. What is Shalom Achshav doing in this environment now, almost 50 years on from its original founding?
So we're trying to do the same thing, and just in a much harder climate. So we're monitoring everything that's going on in the West Bank, in the settlements in East Jerusalem as well, but trying to keep it alive in Israel, to get the people in Israel to fight for the two-state solution, for the end of the occupation. And that's what we're trying to do every day. So we wake up and we go to work and try to convince Israelis through different ways that this is our mission, this is our identity, and this is our future. So that's what we have to do.
And both organizations, I think, are very aligned with J Street in the concept that the desire to find a way to resolution between Israelis and Palestinians is essential to the future of Israel. It's essential to the future of an Israel that is democratic in character, that is Jewish in nature, that is secure. And this is the ultimate act of being pro-Israel, is to pursue the work that you're doing. But we have today a government that is probably as far removed from the principles and the values that J Street stands for, that Ir Amim and Shalom Achshav stands for, and they are actively pursuing the killing of the ability to have a political resolution to this conflict. What I really want to dig in with our two experts today, and I think for folks watching, what you get when you come to a convention like this is you really get a chance to get exposed to the foremost experts in the world on the issues that we work in and day out. Jerusalem is the heart of the conflict. For both peoples, Jerusalem is mythic. It's not just a real city and where 1 million people live and conduct their daily lives. It has a mythology to it, whether it is for Christians and Jews and Muslims, or it's for Palestinians and Jews in a national context. This government and the settlement movement are trying to kill the idea that the city can be not divided, but made into the capital of both peoples. And I'm wondering if you could tell us some of the things that have been happening in the last year or two under this government, even as we're fighting a war in Gaza, and the world has their eyes on the disaster, the moral disaster of Gaza. Jerusalem is under the spotlight of the settlement movement. And maybe you can tell us some of the Sheikh Jarrah and other areas that you're working on and have your eye on.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeremy, I think it's really important that you did mention how much, because our attention has been so much focused on Gaza and also in the West Bank, East Jerusalem has really been overshadowed and has not garnered the attention that it really deserves. And one of the things that we have seen a mass acceleration of have actually been settlement advancements. And we're not just talking about the expansion of existing settlements. We're talking about literally brand new settlements, the confiscation of Palestinian lands to establish new settlements. We're talking about 20,000 housing units for brand new settlements throughout East Jerusalem that, when we're talking about on the ground today, it really impedes the development of Palestinian neighborhoods. It ends up being a coercive measure to push them out of the city, because the two main guiding posts for Israeli policymaking in Jerusalem has been territory and land, land and has been demographics and population. So how do we take over as much land and territory as possible? We're seeing this in the West Bank as well. But how do we also decrease or curb the Palestinian population and increase the Jewish population? And one of the main avenues is through taking over as much land as possible and then filling them and populating them with Jewish settlements and with Israelis. And so we have seen this explosion of settlements that no one was really talking about because it's happening all throughout the West Bank right now, and then all of the destruction and the catastrophe in Gaza. But then on the flip side of that is that we've also seen Israeli authorities and the Israeli government really taking advantage to carry out mass expulsion and displacement. And the way that it takes place, it's very different than in the West Bank. In the West Bank, it's being carried out by violent, brutal settlers that are, yes, they're working at the behest of the government and the Israeli authorities or the military, but it looks a little bit different in East Jerusalem. It's institutionalized. It's carried out by house demolitions. Why? Because of Palestinians lacking building permits. But these building permits are impossible to acquire because of Israeli policy making. And so it's institutionalized. It's like when we compare it back to the Jim Crow laws here in the United States and segregation, it was institutionalized. It was the law of the land. In addition to that, what we've seen is also this mass acceleration of forced evictions and settler takeovers of homes that have really increased since October 7th because all attention and all eyes have been off of East Jerusalem. And so it enables the authorities to be able to carry out these moves without really generating a lot of pushback. And so that is really what's happening. And when we're talking about the implications for a future political resolution, but also just in terms of violations of international law, what are these implications? What are these ramifications for the future if we really want to acquire in a time and a place to have a political resolution that is going to achieve both peace and security and equality and human rights for all? This is what foils the prospects for that.
And Lior, on the West Bank, outside the boundaries of East Jerusalem, there is a set of moves that has been undertaken by the government literally within the last 2 weeks, just before the outbreak of this war. Unprecedented set of new rules. And I would love if you could give us a little bit of insight into some of the elements of that set of cabinet decisions. What are the changes that the government has made? What are the implications of some of those changes?
Well, thank you, Jeremy. And to follow up on your question and to Amy, what she described is going on in East Jerusalem, what's happening in the West Bank is very severe. It's taking over a complete, takeover of the West Bank through settlements and through eviction of Palestinians through settler violence. And I think what you're asking about, the latest cabinet decisions, is a continuation of this policy, just another dramatic sort of decisions by the government. This time an assault on private property. Now, if you look, and that's like they made several decisions. The most dominant one is an assault on private property. One of them is to enable settlers to take over, to purchase lands or private lands of Palestinians in the West Bank, something that is forbidden for them to do today. It's much more difficult for them to do. Now they've opened up their ability to do so, opening it up for possible fraud or other sort of mechanisms, systematic the purchases of Palestinian lands, which is very dangerous. And the second is to sort of declassify hundreds of thousands of lands in the West Bank and to make them from private Palestinian land to state land, a process that is very expensive, that is very long, that is an act of annexation. And this is sort of the major decision that they've made. Another decision that they've made, which went a little bit under the radar, is the ability to demolish Palestinian homes in Palestinian cities, in areas A and B, something that the military did in the past solely for security reasons. Now they took the authorities to do so also under the justifications of the environment or water purposes or archaeology. So now they're bringing the military more authorities to destroy Palestinian homes also in areas A and B in Palestinian cities. So very dramatic decisions, while the focus is, of course, taking over of Palestinian private lands.
So we're here at Word on the Street Live. For those of you who are joining us, we are providing as much possible content as we can over the course of our convention. Our schedule is going to be on our website, jstreet.org, and on our Word on the Street homepage on Substack. Feel free to tune in anytime. Go to our website or to Word on the Street on Substack and see what's coming up, what the schedule is. I know we've got a couple more programs this afternoon. We have a whole day of programming tomorrow, so please do keep your eye open for notifications that'll come through the app, and also check back and look at the schedule online at any point. We're here with Amy Cohen from Ir Amim and Ir Amichai from Peace Now, two of the most incredible organizations that are working on trying to preserve the chance for ultimately peace, ultimately two peoples to live side by side in peace and security. And I want to really focus back in on, I was just in Jerusalem last week, and we lead trips there half a dozen times a year. Lior used to have the misfortune of having to guide us every time we came on the bus, and our trips are in depth. But I was astounded by the level of construction that was going on. It is beyond my wildest imagination. There's a few areas that really struck me. One is in the south of the city. And for folks, I would love for you to be able to describe for people, there's an area known as Givat Hamatos, which is the hill of the helicopter, airplane, right? Masok is and the Matos is the airplane. So Airplane Hill. And it's literally on the edge of Jerusalem, just north of Bethlehem. And strategically, it seems very clear. It's just part of an effort to cut Jerusalem off from Bethlehem. I'm curious what is happening there now, and what's the status of that project?
Exactly. And thank you so much for bringing this up, because this is one of the main areas where there has been an explosion of construction and settlement advancements. Givat Hamatos it is literally under construction, and it began construction under this current government. And it will be the first major settlement in East Jerusalem in 20 years after Har Homa. And if those who are not familiar with it, Givat Hamatos was actually considered an international red line along with E1 for years. The Obama administration spoke out against it, right? We had other international governments that spoke out against Givat Hamatos because of its implications on a political resolution. It literally cuts off East Jerusalem from the southern part of the West Bank. So if we're talking about a contiguous Palestinian independent state with a capital in East Jerusalem, this essentially foils that prospect. And so what we have now is there's literally construction going on. There's bulldozers and excavators. And it's something like Jeremy said, in our wildest dreams, we thought we would never see. I take delegations there and groups there probably every other week. And there's some new fact on the ground, and it's unbelievable. And it's not just 100 housing units. It's over 6,000 housing units right now. So they haven't even finished building the first plan, and they've now just approved the second plan to expand Givat Hamatos. I mean, it's just exploding. But it's not just that it actually cuts off East Jerusalem from the West Bank. What it also does is it fragments the Palestinian space inside East Jerusalem. It literally hedges in a Palestinian neighborhood by the name of Beit Safafa. Right now, Beit Safafa is completely hedged in with Israeli construction. And so you just think about all of these imperiling moves that are not necessarily on the future of a Palestinian state, but what is happening on the ground today, which completely restricts and suppresses Palestinian development, which at the end of the day serves as a coercive measure to uproot Palestinians from the city. But Givat Hamatos is not alone. There are about 1, 2, 3 other new settlement advancements all around the radius of Givat Hamatos that is there. They are advancing it in order to connect the dots and completely sever East Jerusalem from the southern part of the West Bank. And this is an area that has been concentrated under this government, but also under this administration. I mean, the Trump administration has given absolutely no breaks on these types of moves in the area. And again, what we're talking about in terms of the future, it looks nearly impossible because of everything going on the ground right now.
And you mentioned the pressure, the international pressure, and this is one of the reasons that J Street is involved. American pressure held this project back for decades. It held projects like E1 back for decades. And it is so vital that Americans understand the leverage and the power that they have. And Lior, I want to turn to you and sort of ask you for your perspective on what's happening around the West Bank, particularly with settler violence and with the use of the farm designation as a way of capturing land. These are, again, steps. Settler violence was a big focus for the Biden administration. They had a whole regime of sanctions, and that was rolled back under President Trump. How important is international and specifically American engagement in trying to prevent the worst of these excesses from happening?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jeremy. It's really important. I'll just add one more thing, because Amy rightly mentioned Givat HaMatos, and E1 was thrown in there, but E1 was also approved and tenders were published for E1. So E1, we could expect...
I was definitely going there. I was going to get to E1, so we'll come back to that.
Okay, so I won't say, but and also Atarot, which is also a big plan of those in the business, which is being discussed and possibly approved in the coming weeks. Another big plan for 9,000 housing units in the north part of Jerusalem. So massive changes on the ground under this government. Things that in the past were weren't believable, that we wouldn't believe that it would happen. Certainly determining how the possibility of a two-state solution, making it much more difficult, are being approved under this government. But to go back to your question, I think, the one thing that you see most under this government is the proliferation of outposts and violent outposts and settler violence. We've counted at Peace Now, I think it's 186 outposts, new outposts under this government in 3 years, nearly 90 in last year alone. That's almost 2 outposts a week, an outpost and a half a week. I think B'Tselem counts for more than 50 Palestinian communities that have been evicted completely due to settler violence. The UN accounts for 1,800 or over 1,800 settler violence incidents in 2025 alone. So this is really, I know it's anarchy led by the state in purpose of taking over territory and evicting Palestinian population, the weakest Palestinian populations, out of their lands. And I think that international pressure was really important and is really important to prevent it. And we saw that under Biden, they went as far as to sanction very violent settlers who are involved in this, and eventually evolved into actually also sanctioning settler institutions. And this was really important and showed, for a moment there was a promise that actually something could stop this, the Israeli government from, because they're not acting on this, to put pressure on them to stop this. But unfortunately, under Trump, this was all back, and they feel that they can do whatever they want. And under this government, with Ben Gvir as the minister of the police, Smotrich and Strzok, the ministers are responsible for the West Bank, for the occupied territories, and of course, under Netanyahu's responsibility, settler violence is something that is really shameful. And when we think about it as a state of the Jewish people, it's really hard for us to grasp that this is happening on a regular basis in such a violent way, communities suffering from this. It's really disastrous, I believe.
Yeah, and it is immoral. It is against Jewish values. It's against international law. It should be against Israeli law. And to be at the front lines of urging that the United States do something about this is the ultimate pro-Israel act, because what we're doing is trying to help Israel to ensure it hangs on to its soul, that it hangs on to the ability to ultimately separate and have another sovereign state for the Palestinian people next to it. And these are pro-Israel actions. And so J Street is very proud to be supporting the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, which is a piece of legislation. And those watching online, hopefully you've heard about this through J Street emails and J Street notices. We are advocating strongly. More than half of Democratic senators and Democratic members of Congress at this point are co-sponsors of this legislation. When the control of the House and Senate shift, when control of the White House shifts, this will again become the law of the land. It won't just be an executive order. We will pass legislation that codifies sanctions against these entities and sanctions against these settlers. The tide will turn, and it's the involvement of J Street in support of incredible work that's being done on the ground that's going to make sure that this voice carries the day. I want to return back to Jerusalem. We've been talking a bit about, I love to describe Jerusalem's geography as the face of a clock. And you've got at noon to the north, Ramallah, and over to the right, if you're looking at 3 o'clock, you have Jordan. And you look south at 6 o'clock and you have Bethlehem. And that surrounding periphery is where all these big new developments, whether it's the Atarot that Lior mentioned at 12 o'clock, or E1, which is at 3 o'clock, or Givat HaMatos, which is at 6 o'clock, all of these are being developed in a very deliberate manner to encircle the city and cut it off from the Palestinian cities that so naturally are adjacent. But then within the clock, right at the center of the clock, is the old city. And there too, you not only have this effort to encircle the city, but then you have the effort right in the heart of the city. And there's a village called Silwan, which is just south of the old city. And for those who know their history, 3,000 years ago, it was in fact where King David lived, and it was the city of David, and you can find archaeological evidence of that. But instead of respecting and recognizing the connection of 3,000 years of people to that land, it's being turned by a settler organization into a theme park that celebrates one layer of the history. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how archaeology and culture and museums and theme parks are being used to essentially erase other people's history and culture in Jerusalem. It's happening right now.
You read my mind, because this was something I wanted to mention because of the fact that right now there has been such an escalation of these measures, in particularly Siwan. And it is a neighborhood that Ir Amim has been working really closely with for many years. Also, Peace Now has been working really closely with, because of the combination of measures that are being employed to take over the space. One is what Jeremy mentioned through archaeology and tourism and heritage. And it's essentially, the way that we call it is a settlement under the guise of tourism and archaeology and heritage to take over the entire space, which appears innocuous, because who would ever come against a tourist attraction, right? But what we see on the ground, as Jeremy mentioned, is that it's used to only highlight one people's history and attachment to the land at the expense of every other civilization and every other people. And namely, what is most present are the Palestinian. It is a Palestinian neighborhood. And so we have seen this exploitation of archaeology to take over the space. But then in addition to that is that you have multiple levels. And so here you have, just adjacent to where Wadi Khilwe, or where the City of David National Park is, which is operated by a settler organization by the name of Elad, is that right adjacent to that, there is another community called Al Bustan, which is under threat of mass demolition. We're talking about 1,500 people that are under threat as we speak. They have been given demolition orders. And just after the end of Ramadan, we're talking about mid-March, about 135 people could already lose their homes. But that it doesn't end there, because just adjacent to Al Bustan, you have another community by the name of Batin al Hawa, which is a community that is facing forced evictions by settlers and settler takeovers of their homes. And we've had an explosion of these evictions. And so altogether, what we have calculated, just as we speak, you have over 2,000 Palestinians from the most politically and religiously sensitive area of Jerusalem, just in the shadows of the walls, the old city walls. You have over 2,000 Palestinians that are under threat of displacement and dispossession today. And some of these families could lose their homes as soon as 2 to 3 weeks from now. And this is something that we have really been trying to advocate for a complete end and halt, because ultimately, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what's going on in the West Bank, is that East Jerusalem has already been annexed. And what we have seen through annexation is that annexation always equates to expulsion and seizure of Palestinian lands. And so here we have what's going on in the West Bank is like a precursor. It's already happening, but it's going to become so much more greater when you have the full annexation that is applied to the West Bank.
So we are coming towards the end of our half hour here together on Word on the Street Live, discussing the realities on the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem. And I want to close it out by asking each of you to reflect a little bit on the importance of politics in all of this. Neither of your organizations are nonprofit, tax-exempt, organizations that don't get directly involved in politics, but we need to find allies in the political world, whether it's in this country where we're working as J Street, but it's really in Israel, that we need to make the case to the next government, which we hope will be a different direction, that this has to stop, and it has to stop immediately, and it has to be reversed. And I'm curious whether you find in your work, I assume that as much as you brief international organizations, you are trying to get briefings with the opposition parties and with those who might become back into power. Is there openness within the Israeli political world to some of the messages about how vital it is to rein settler violence in, to stop the expulsions, to stop the land grabs, in order to ensure that Israel has a path forward? Do you find that openness in the Israeli opposition at all?
Well, great question. And I think that is the most important mission that we have. And I think this is all about politics. And so we have to put our political pressure and our civic pressure on the politicians to make the right things for the state of Israel and for the Palestinians. I'll say two things. One, there is no openness for the Messianic right in Israel. We see that, if one can wish for, I wish I will ever have a minister like Minister Smotrich, because he's doing so much for the settler community, so many bad things, of course, but we need ministers that will work hard as he does, and he doesn't care about anything else apart from his fulfilling his ideology. But what we are also seeing is, despite his great achievements for the destruction of the state of Israel and for the future Palestinian state, he's not passing the threshold. So he doesn't have the popular support for his policies. And I think that if you ask Israelis, the thing that they're most ashamed of, and this is across the spectrum, is by the violent settlers. They see them and they're ashamed of them and what they're doing. So I think these are things that we can hold on to. The other thing that I think is something that gives me optimism is that when you look at the polls of the Israeli public, even today, is that if you frame the conflict in a way that, you see that the Israelis are not attached to the settlers and to the settlements, and under different sort of variations of agreement, like a regional agreement or a security agreement or a US-led agreement, they would support a two-state solution to this conflict even today. So I think there's a lot of things to work with. We do engage with Israeli politicians, and following the 7th of October, I think there's much more opening than there was in the past. I do think that there's a lot more to do, and it is disappointing that still many politicians in the Israeli center are not daring to understand or to speak their voice or to get into the grips of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to understand that they have to show an alternative to the policies of settlements and constant war and the current Israeli government's policies. So I do think that you guys have a vital role as well as we do to put this pressure on the Israeli people, on the Israeli politicians, to show them that there is an alternative and that we can't live in this situation forever. We have to go for peaceful sort of agreements.
Amy, would you like to comment as a closing a little bit on not only the openness within Israel to understanding what's happening in Jerusalem, but again, to the importance of all of us here being involved in pressing for a different future?
Yeah. So one of the the activities that we engage in is public education and outreach, in addition to international advocacy and policy advocacy and research and legal work and all of that. We do public education and outreach, and we do a lot of that with Israelis. We take them on tours and do workshops and seminars, and it's a way to help reorient discourse in order for the average Israeli to understand what's going on in Jerusalem. Majority of Israelis have no idea what's happening on the other side, right? It's interesting with like the East-West Street, right? What Philippe Sands spoke about, right? And it almost seems like these, completely two different sides, that a lot of Israelis have no idea what's going on the other side. And so this is an attempt for our organization to help reshape that discourse around Jerusalem and introducing Israelis to a completely other side, but also bringing them in to actually grassroots peacemaking and peace building within the city, to actually building a coalition in order for there to be a much more of a what we call co-resistance between Israelis and Palestinians working together towards peace and security. But we can't do that alone. And we have seen this post October 7th. We cannot do it alone without the international community and without our allies and individuals within the U.S. and people like you all at J Street supporting the work that we do on the ground, because without you, it's impossible. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here today.
Well, thank you very much to Amy Cohen and Ir Amim, and thank you very much for the organizations that you represent. These are but two of the incredible partners that are here at the J Street National Convention. We have an exhibit hall that is full of incredible NGOs. These are the activists and the human rights warriors who are trying to create the groundwork for a better future for Israelis and for Palestinians. They carry the best of the values of our people. And so I thank you for the work that you do. I thank everybody on Word on the Street who's been joining us for our programming during the course of the convention. We will be back later this afternoon with another round of interviews. We'll also be back tomorrow with a full day of programming. So please do check our website, jstreet.org, and check our Substack, Word on the Street, for further programming. Thanks again. It's wonderful to be with you all. And please, our thoughts are with you and your families at a moment of, I'm sure, great anxiety and fear. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.